Hello, thank you for listening to Ambient Light, where we talk about the art and magic of power photographs. I'm Sabrina, and I'm your host. Hi there, we're going to get right into the episode in just a moment. I wanted to do a couple of reminders. One is to check in on masterclass.photoxo.net to see when is the next available time that you can register for how to preserve your family photos for the future. It's an online 1-hour masterclass where I give you some tips that you can start implementing right away to make sure that your family photos are safe for generations to come. Check in at subscribe.photoxo.net and join my email list, where I send out emails a couple times a week that are similar to what we talk about on the podcast. I think if you enjoy what you hear on here, you would probably enjoy being on that email list. And lastly, I want to extend gratitude to my patrons on patreon.com/Sabrina Hughes. This week's new patron is Laura Cameron Keith. So thank you so much, Laura, for being my patron. And I am very, very grateful for everyone's support. Okay, here we go right into this episode. I think you're going to like this one. I want to kick off a segment that is really behind the whole idea for this podcast, which is talking about, or, inviting you all to talk about a photograph that's particularly meaningful to you. Or one of my favorite types of photographs to think about is like a picture of you as a kid that projects the same energy that you have right now, like it was almost foreshadowing who you'd become. I'll talk about one of mine in a future episode, but first I just wanted to describe to you or share with you this photo that I think is the only picture that I have of my great grandfather, Samuel. So the picture in and of itself isn't terribly interesting. He's wearing a brown suit and a bow tie, and he has he's wearing a hat that's kind of like a boater hat, but it's not straw, but it does have like a thick ribbon around it with something stuck in the band, in the ribbon, like you would see in an old movie, like someone in the press would have that, press tag stuck in there, but he's not press. He's holding up a book and a magazine, and he looks so serious. He's not smiling. He's looking directly at the camera. And then the way the picture's composed is like he's in the center, as is kind of typical when you have a picture of a person. It's landscape orientation. So he's standing in front of some tropical plants, like some prickly kinds. They're not bromeliads, I don't know what they are. And then a 2-story kind of institutional looking building behind him with big windows, maybe some kind of factory or something. And then way in the background is just kind of a carport with some people way off in the distance. So he's standing in the foreground holding up this book and something else in his hand. And there's what looks like a bag or a suitcase or something down around his knees. And this is the only picture that I have of Samuel. And what he's doing, and part of the reason why I wanted to share this picture, is that he's doing something, he's evangelizing. And this is something that has trickled down into my life in a not so great way. Samuel was the first person in my family, in my ancestry, to convert to being a Jehovah's Witness. Unfortunately, that's basically all I know about my great-grandfather, Samuel. I don't know anything else about him, which is, it's a little strange. I know I'm not the only one to not know anything about my great-grandparents, but this picture of him is from the 60s. Like, it's not that old. It's a color photograph. So it's not like, he died in 1920 and, nobody that I lived with him. Like, this is someone who died. Actually, I'm not sure when he died, but this is someone who lived during my mom's memory. Like, my mom knew Samuel. I didn't. So, yeah, I don't know anything about him except that he was the one to first join this cult, Jehovah's Witnesses. I know that some of you might be familiar with the religion as people that used to knock on your door. Now they kind of stand around next to carts full of propaganda. And you might not really know anyone who's a Jehovah's Witness well enough to understand exactly how much control this religion exerts over people's lives, but it does. It exerts a whole lot of control in ways that are defined as cult organizations. So I'm not exaggerating when I say that my great-grandfather joined a cult. Part of what led him to convert was finding a propaganda leaflet advertising an upcoming public lecture. And the leaflet was called "Millions Now Living Will Never Die," which is, some of you might recognize, is also the name of a Tortoise album. They named it after that. The talk and the leaflet came first, obviously. So my great-grandfather Samuel found this basically piece of trash. It was garbage. It was on the ground. It was litter. He found some litter on the ground, was struck by the title of the propaganda, went to the public lecture, and over time, I don't know how long because I don't know anything about him, eventually joined this cult. And my grandmother, who wasn't his daughter, but his daughter-in-law, actually was brought into the cult at some point. She was obviously already married to my grandfather because Samuel was his dad. So it was sometime, my grandmother was an adult. My grandmother was a very smart woman. So I don't, people get sucked into high control groups like this. It has nothing to do with how smart they are. It has to do with them seeking something that they're not finding somewhere else and thinking that this group has the answer. And this religious group, the Jehovah's Witnesses, are very, very confident that they have all the answers to everything. I had asked my grandma in the past why she left Catholicism, and she said it was because she had questions that the priests couldn't answer. So this religion was giving both my great-grandfather Samuel and my grandma Emily some answers to questions they had, and that satisfied them. Obviously, the answers were incorrect because they were very definitive answers with timelines of, destruction of the world that has not happened and isn't going to happen because it's all made up. So this picture of Samuel, this is all kind of backstory to return to me today in the end of 2019, looking at this picture of Samuel who's holding up a Bible and some kind of leaflet, some other kind of propaganda by the Watchtower Society, which is the publishing company that actually is what is behind this religion. And you can tell by the way he's dressed, by his very serious face, and the fact that he's holding up the Bible and the magazine as if to get someone's attention, right? He takes this very seriously. He's obviously very serious about what he feels is his calling to indoctrinate others. And although I didn't know him, and again, I know absolutely nothing about him beyond his name. I don't know what he did for a living. I have no idea what led him to convert. What kind of questions was he looking for that he found in this farce of a religion? I don't know. I don't know any of that. And I attribute that to the way that this religion in particular, as well as other high control groups like Scientology or other religious groups that isolate you from your family, that don't encourage connection to the past, but instead kind of scare you into thinking about what family is or is not going to live through the upcoming apocalypse into the future. It keeps you, afraid of everything rather than searching for meaning in your own experience and in your own knowledge and, perhaps in your own family. So Samuel, I don't know much about him. I probably will never know much about him. I'm not sure if I know my mom had met Samuel when he was alive, but I don't know if she knows a whole lot about him. Again, I don't think that I'm exaggerating to say that I think that the reason I don't know much about him is simply because of this indoctrination that did trickle all the way down into my life. So Samuel converted, and then my grandmother, his daughter-in-law Emily, converted, and then my mother was, of course, born into the religion, as was I and my brother. And we've all left since then. We've all been out for quite a while, which is excellent, and all of our lives are better for it. I do think it's important to talk about it, though. I would never talk about my religion when I was actually in the religion, because I felt like such a phony the whole time. But that silence, especially by people that have left, is really part of, it's still playing into the type of control that's exerted over the individuals in this cult who are indoctrinated into its beliefs. So I have started talking about it recently. And so when I came across this picture of Samuel just in a recent group that my dad gave me that he found that needed to be scanned, I saw it and I was like, this is kind of the perfect photo to talk about in terms of it being just a regular old ordinary picture, but it's capturing Samuel practicing his faith, which is something that trickled down for, decades after he converted. So this picture means a lot in retrospect. It definitely didn't necessarily mean a lot when he was taking it. It didn't mean a whole lot even in the larger collection of our family photos. It doesn't stand out at all, except that it's one of the only pictures I've seen from our family photos where someone is actively engaged in they call it the ministry. It's not a ministry. Where someone is actively engaged in the conversion and indoctrination practice through the propaganda that this printing company makes. So that's one picture. That's one picture that's important to me. I really am interested in talking to anybody who would like to have a short conversation about one of their pictures. Obviously, this photo for me, this is the introduction to this segment that I want to do, and I'm introducing it on a rather kind of sober note, which isn't always my intention. Your photo, if you would love to talk about a picture, it doesn't have to be anything heavy or deep. It can be as deep or as heavy as you want it, but I'm also going to talk about a couple of pictures that I have that I think are just hilarious, like of pictures of me that really make me laugh a lot when I see them. So I'm kicking this off with a kind of a somber photo, and that that also has to do with me wanting to share a little bit of my life with you all, and a little bit about where I'm coming from with my interest in family photographs and with what I think they're capable of. My interest in it, I think I've only just realized over the last year that so much of my interest in this project of mine of, kind of helping people preserve their family photos and telling the stories and stuff like that, it really does come out of the fact that when you're indoctrinated into a high control group, family is not the most important thing. I always kind of laugh whenever I see in TV shows and movies, people are like, family is the most important thing, like that's a plot point. And it's honestly something that I still just, even though I don't consider myself indoctrinated anymore, that's just an experience that I never had. Family comes second when you're in a group like this. Family comes second to the group, to the organization that is giving you rules to follow. So I honestly do feel like, having been a member, indoctrinated in a high control group for, the first 20 or so years of my life, absolutely dissolved the kind of family bonds and family connections that other people have. And maybe that are often, not maybe, these types of connections that are often fostered by family church, or, by family shared religious views, or things like that. Like, this cult doesn't celebrate any holidays. It doesn't celebrate any holidays at all. So the kind of closeness that you get from being at a family, Christmas dinner, or opening presents, or having Easter. What kind of meal do you have for Easter? Dinner or lunch? I don't even know. Birthdays, picnics, 4th of July picnics, any day that's a holiday that, you usually spend with family as a kid because everyone has off. Those were not family bonding opportunities for our family. In fact, you kind of had to go to great pains to show that you weren't getting together with your family on Christmas, your extended family, because then it appears that you're celebrating Christmas and you could get in trouble for that. So I do feel like this was an important photo for me to share, because it helps you get to know me a little bit more, and it helps you all, anybody who's listening to this at this point, see that I am coming at this from the perspective of someone who kind of sees from the outside how important these family stories are, and how important photos are in keeping family memories, and in helping, connections form even with people that you'll never meet because they're dead. I don't know, it's possible I've seen this picture over and over and over again in my past and had no idea this was Samuel until the most recent time I saw it. I don't have any family connection with Samuel. Like, obviously he's my great-grandfather. We're related, but I don't have any sense of who he was when I look at this picture. That's a family bond that's lost, because I know a lot of people who do know a lot about their great-grandparents, or maybe even farther back than that. So, pictures are important, and they are talismanic. They stand for something invisible. They stand for something more that is, the kind of invisible family bonds that grow over generations, and that can be torn down through any number of ways. Ours were torn down by indoctrination in this cult. There are any number of ways those bonds can be torn down and rebuilt, I should say. So if you would love to talk to me for about 5 or 10 minutes about any photo that you have, email me, sabrina@photoxo.net. That's PHOTOXO.net. And just shoot me an email. I would love, love, love to have a quick conversation with you about any old picture you want to talk about. Okay, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of Ambient Light. I'm Sabrina Hughes. If you're ready to start preserving your own family photographs, visit me on my website at photoxo.net. That's PHOTOXO.net. This podcast is supported by my patrons on Patreon. If you would like to become one of my patrons, I would absolutely love to have you. You can find me on patreon.com/Sabrina Hughes. And I'm very active on Instagram, on my regular account, which is @Sabrina Hughes, and on my vintage photo account, which is The Picurious. ThePicurious. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.